All right, kings, gentlemen, everyone else, welcome to yet another exciting episode of Guy walking through a residential neighborhood and talking about China. So we're going to have to talk about China today because I'm assuming a lot of you know about the Munich Security Conference and all of the European politicians, European heads of state, heads of government. They're all saying, okay, fuck it, it's for real this time. The Americans are no longer going to be involved in the defense of Europe, and frankly, I could have told them that a couple of years ago, that we shouldn't be relying on the Americans, and now America is going to be our enemy. It is unfortunate, but it is what it is, and they're going to be taking action, hopefully, to sort of stabilize Europe, make sure that European security is not threatened by this transitional period. That's assuming, of course, that they it doesn't pop off into a hot war, but a lot of people have been saying, we should go with the Chinese now if the Americans are no longer being our friends. And I'm making this video to tell you why this is a bad idea. Now, on this channel, I have recorded a video before, which is about why the Chinese are an enemy of Europe, that because they have a fundamentally, they despise us at a racial level and at a civilizational level. There's no amount of money, there's no amount of cooperation or diplomacy that can really bridge that gap between China and Europe. And I gotta say, I mean, the history of Europe and China, so in the 1970s, you had the whole Henry Kissinger go to China, and then Richard Nixon went to China, and basically the West tried to integrate China into the Western system. And the Chinese used us to get rich. They used us to sort of lift themselves up from abject poverty into, well, they're not exactly a functional state right now, but at least they're only dying in their millions instead of their billions, or in their hundreds of thousands instead of millions. And how has China thanked the West for that? Well, it has been hostile. It has been using TikTok to subvert our economies and our discourse. It has basically acted like a stereotypical moneylender with European states. And fundamentally, these people, they have this sort of chip on their shoulder about the century of humiliation, and they want to impose a century of humiliation upon us, upon Europeans, as revenge. And of course, this includes Americans, but the Americans always think they have a free option, that their destiny is separate from that of the rest of Western civilization. But bully for them. Let's see how that works out for you guys. Anyway, so that's the theory. Now let's look at the practice. Let's look at the practical examples of how China has acted. In the few places in Europe, it actually does have a toehold. So I'm going to talk here about 4 countries. 3 of which are definitely Balkan, and 1 can be called a Balkan country after a fashion. So we're going to be talking about Hungary, Serbia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. In Hungary, a lot of people have said that Viktor Orban is pro-Russian, and Viktor Orban is indeed pro-Russian. He is a former informer for the Communist Secret Service, just like his father. So, this sort of affinity goes back a long way. But in many ways, Viktor Orban is a lot more pro-Chinese than pro-Russian. He has essentially prostituted Hungary's economy to the Chinese. The Chinese have gone in with a lot of quote-unquote investment, including the highly dangerous battery factories, which are chugging along in Hungary as we speak. He has also given free rein to the Chinese mafia to smuggle weapons, drugs in and out of Europe, and children. So there's if you're Hungarian and you have a child, there is a non-zero risk that the Chinese will steal your children and sell them for sexual slavery or organs. There is also the minor issue of, I'm blanking on it. Well, essentially, the Chinese have taken over Hungary, and it used to be, now he had to stop it because Brussels stopped him from doing it. Viktor Orban would essentially sell EU residency to wealthy Chinese nationals. So if you make €1 million investment into Hungary, you could get Hungarian residency and be fast-tracked for citizenship, which through the Schengen area gives you access to the entire European Union. because the European Union means free movement of capital and labor. If you're a Hungarian resident or citizen, you're free to work and live anywhere in the European Union. Brussels made Orban stop that, and that's one of those sovereignty overreaches that he keeps kvetching about. And it's an eminently wise move, if you're asking me. Just this guy selling access to the Schengen area for wealthy Chinese, that's not a good idea. That's Hungary. Let's move on to Serbia. Now, in Serbia, there are a number of villages and towns where the Chinese have basically befouled them to such a horrific extent that a large percentage of the population now lives with pulmonary disease and all sorts of weird cancers. Now, in China, they have these places called cancer villages where the entire population has some form of cancer or another. Serbia is not there yet, but these towns in Serbia are quickly gaining on the Chinese because the Chinese have zero, and I do mean zero, regard for environmental protection or consumer protection or worker protection. So, you get these Chinese factories in the chemical sector, in the automotive sector, and like everywhere, and they're destroying these hitherto idyllic Serbian villages, right? And they're turning them into absolute dumps, into cancer-ridden, toxic wastelands. And very recently in Serbia, you may have noticed there have been protests against the government. Let me tell you how the protests started. So in the city of Novi Sad, which is the largest city, the second largest city of Serbia, and the capital of Vojvodina, which is a province of Serbia, which was historically Hungarian, but let's not talk about that for a moment. The roof of the train station collapsed, killing 14 people, including one Macedonian national, university professor at that. And the collapse of the roof was traced back to essentially shoddy Chinese workmanship, because the Chinese had added a new roof to the station. And now the people have taken to the streets because it became clear that the Serbian government, headed by Aleksandar Vučić, is ready to jeopardize their people's health and safety in order to get ever more Chinese money. That Vučić has turned Serbia into a vassal state of China. And of course, the Serbs are not going to stand for that. And I commend them for doing it. I commend them for taking to the streets and protesting the Vučić government. And of course, in Hungary and Serbia, you can actually be arrested by Chinese police under Chinese law, because sovereignty just does not exist for these two European countries. Hungary and Serbia are not sovereign because, people tell you, oh, you Europeans are under American hegemony or under German hegemony, right? But let me tell you something. If a German national commits a crime in Macedonia, a Macedonian cop will arrest him, and he will be tried in a Macedonian court, and of course the German embassy is going to get involved. But even in such a disparity of power as exists between Germany and Macedonia, and Germany or America and Macedonia, they're still going to respect our sovereignty. Yeah, the Americans too, as well. China does not respect the sovereignty of European states and European peoples, and that's why Serbia and Hungary are humiliated like that. So that's what we can look forward to if we're going to be friends with China. China does not want to be friends with European peoples. China wants to enslave and humiliate European peoples like they're enslaving and humiliating Hungarians and Serbs. Now, in Montenegro, China has essentially put a lien on the whole country because they used predatory lending to essentially bully and trick the Montenegrins into building a massive highway, a highway to nowhere, with these seemingly affordable Chinese loans. But then, like I said, this is like stereotypical moneylender behavior. And of course, they bribed the Montenegrin government to put their people under this crushing Chinese debt, which will last for generations. And something similar was also going on here in Macedonia in 2015 and 2016, where there was another Chinese highway project again, financed with these cheap loans, well, seemingly cheap loans, but here also executed by Chinese companies, and they fucked it up so badly. Like, when they were building it, they essentially built the two tracks of the highway past each other and lost a bunch of money in the process. Now, of course, our corrupt government covered it up. It was one of the big scandals that brought it down back in 17. But now the same political party is back in power, and they're once again cavorting with the Chinese. So what do we know from these four examples? And I would ask you to especially take a look at what's going on in Serbia and Hungary, because that's where the Chinese subversion and Chinese rot is the worst. We learned that any European country that partners with China is essentially making a deal with the devil. I would say, if you want to think about the Chinese as I don't think that's fair to the devil, to be honest, because the devil might actually look for other people to torment. The Chinese are always driven by this resentment, by this need to feel superior to Europeans. And it will not stop because it's not because they want money, it's because they want revenge for a perceived slight by Europeans during the century of humiliation. They hold none of our values. They don't believe in sovereignty of nations. They don't believe in environmental protection. They don't believe in worker protection. They do not even believe in doing the bare minimum to stop people from dying of horrific cancers and poisoning and pulmonary disease and being crushed by falling roofs. That's who the Chinese are. They are enemies of Europe. I would even go so far as to call them enemies of humanity and the planet, because they obviously are. They've been trying to destroy endangered species and poison the environment horribly, even within China. They don't care about China. They care about getting money and getting revenge. That's who the Chinese are. So my advice to the elected heads of Europe and the crowned ones, if they're listening, is do not make a deal with the Chinese. Do not even think about dealing with the Chinese. If you think the Americans are bad, if you think the fucking Russians are bad, you have not met the Chinese.